Hey everybody, welcome to today's episode of our Facebook Live feature here at the Houston Zoo. My name's Scott, I'm one of the reptile keepers here, and today we're going to go check out the tortoise yard. So come on in. As we're waiting, a few people are going to be logging in, so we're going to give them a little extra time, but I will still continue to tell you guys a little bit about the tortoises. Also, not only do we have 8 tortoises in here, several different species which we'll go over, we also have 2 other of my co-workers, also reptile keepers here. We have Priscilla and Chris. We're going to go over to Chris first. As you guys will see as the camera's panning around, we have 3 different species. That right there is one of our African spur-thighed tortoises. That is Bobby and Bubbles. They're about 32 years old, just shy of 100 pounds apiece. That is full size for these guys. They can get larger, about 100, maybe 115. We also have in the background, you might be able to see our 2 radiated tortoises. That is Mr. and Mrs. Pickles. Mrs. Pickles is about 50 years old, and Mr. Pickles is our old man of the group. He is 87. He's the oldest animal we have in our collection right now in the reptile department. In the background, you'll see some larger ones. Those are our Galapagos tortoises. They're actually the youngest ones in here. They're all siblings. They're about 12 years old. That's Seymour right there. We also have 3 others named Daphne, Jervis, and Pinta. They're all named after different Galapagos islands. They weigh about 160 to 180 pounds. They are still growing. Justin asked how long do they live? So for these guys, it's typically about 100, but there have been records that exceed close to 150 to 180 years old. And that's just with estimates currently. Galapagos tortoises can see color. As you see, they are very attracted to us right now. Their favorite colors include greens and reds and yellows, typically food items they'll be able to find. Today we're going to be feeding them a couple of different treats. They'll have carrots, yams, romaine lettuce, green leaf lettuce, and also some tortoise pellets, which is kind of like a dog food but formulated for these guys. Alexis asked how big can they get? So if you look at the Galapagos tortoises, they are only about half grown. So they're about 160 to 180 pounds. Full size, we're looking anywhere between 300 to 600 pounds. Lucy asked if they are good swimmers. So the tortoises do have lungs located at the top of their shells. That will actually allow them to float for short distances. They have been known to hop between islands, but as far as long distance swimming, it's not been researched too well. They do enjoy their mud wallows. Much like you might have seen different animals such as elephants, they do cover themselves in mud as a sort of insect repellent. And they also will drink from the clear water, but they do have water bowls spread throughout the exhibit for fresh water 24/7. Mandy asked if they have good eyesight. They do have very good vision, so they can scope out some tasty treats. They do see colors. Some of their favorites are greens, reds, and yellows. Our horticulture department actually grows a lot of plants on grounds that we're able to feed to our animals. One of their favorite treats is hibiscus flowers, which do come in a variety of colors. They see very well and will immediately come rushing over to us anytime we bring them in. Emma asked if they are endangered. That's a very good question, and these guys definitely are threatened. All 3 species in their various locations. We do have partners in the Galapagos Islands that are currently working with them. They're using GPS technology to track the tortoises to learn about their behavior and habitat. And also they do Head Start programs where they collect eggs, hatch them out, and then release them back to the wild so they have a better chance of survival. We want to hop over to Chris real quick. He's sitting here with Daphne and Seymour, 2 of our Galapagos tortoises. And what you can see is happening right now is Daphne is in what's known as the finch reflex. So whenever they are touched like that, it's what the little birds will do on the islands, the Galapagos finches. they'll actually come over and they'll sit on the tortoises and eat all the bugs that are causing them issues, such as fleas, ticks, things like that. So here you can emulate it almost, because the tortoise gets very still as a reflex, and so that way they don't scare the birds off, so they can get as many of the parasites off of them as possible. And he is touching their shell. They can feel the shell is made out of keratin. So if everyone at home right now wants to look at their fingernail, which is also made of keratin, take your other finger and rub it on top of your fingernail, and that's sort of what they feel whenever you touch their shell. You might have noticed that some of the tortoises have very large portions on their scaling, their legs and shells. Those are a lot of times used for protectants or to ward off predators. It says, "Hi Courtney and our friends at Houston Live." Elsie would like to know how fast they can run. So, all our tortoises as reptiles are known as ectotherms or cold-blooded, which means they can't produce their own body heat. So they get all their energy from outside sources such as the sun. So on a day like today, it's fairly warm out, and so they are full of energy and ready to go. This is about as quick as you'll see them. Our spur thighs can go a little faster than everybody else, but we have moved them across the yard before, and it takes about 10 minutes for a Galapagos tortoise to walk from one end to the other. Heather asked how many species. So in the exhibit we have 3 species, but on the islands there is taxonomic change going on right now, so the number is a little different depending on who you talk to. They are currently mapping out genomically who's related and who's hybridized, and so that number changes quite a bit. Emily asked, what are their names? So for the Galapagos tortoises, we have 4 siblings. They're named after the Galapagos Islands: Jervis, Daphne, Pinta, and Seymour. The 2 African spur thighs, which are those tan ones, those are going to be Bobby and Bubbles. And then our 2 radiated tortoises, the little ones, are Mr. and Mrs. Pickles, which is our old couple in the exhibit. Angela asked, do they have predators? That's a great question, and typically at this size they do not have any natural predators where they come from. It's only the smaller tortoises that will have issues with larger birds or snakes. But a lot of their issues in the wild are to do with habitat loss. Adelise asked, are they born with their shells? That's a great question. So their shells are actually just an extension of their backbone and rib cage. So they are born with it. They can't unfortunately take it off and change like some hermit crabs, or you might see some TV shows portray them as. They are stuck in their shell for as long as they live. But it is their protectant there, so they'll be able to scoot in a little bit. And that's actually why you'll see on the Galapagos tortoises why their front feet have all those extra armor plates. Because when they pull in, that'll help protect their face, which is a little bit softer than the rest of their body. Aubrey asked, how many eggs can they lay? So it does vary on the individual and the season, but typically it's about 6 to 14 eggs per lay. So earlier we were talking about how they can move around and how fast they go. So that's actually one of the things we work on in the department as a training option and enrichment. So we're going to come over to Priscilla real quick. So Priscilla, you'll be able to see she has a couple tools of the trade to help us out. In her hand she has the large silver pole with the red and white buoy on it. That's known as a target stick. The goal is we want the tortoise to touch the end of the buoy with his nose. And whenever we do that, we will bridge him with the verbal cue of good and reward him with a reinforcer. In this case, it'll be a carrot or a yam. So the goal is to get them to associate that every time they touch the target, that is what we'd like them to do. And they know that it's a good thing because they get reinforced with the food item. Reinforcers aren't always food items, but in this case, they are very food motivated. This helps not only them, but us as well. They do weigh close to 180 pounds. We don't like to pick them up, and they do not like to be picked up either. So it's a lot easier when we need them to move somewhere, or we needed to step onto a scale to weigh them for a medical exam. It's easier to have them do it themselves than for us to have to manually manipulate them. So this is Seymour, and they do have visual color vision. They see very well to find food. So that's one of the benefits of having a red piece on the target. Red is one of their favorite colors that they easily distinguish out of all the others. And so they'll typically go right on over to the target, and we're gonna look for the touch.
Good.
There we go, Priscilla bridged, and then we're gonna reinforce with the food item. So by replicating this behavior over and over, we create the relationship between the food item and the target pole. So over time, they realize that we want them to follow us and touch the target stick, which helps immensely for moving them. Clay asked if they have favorite keepers. So they do react differently to various people. They can recognize us to a certain extent. A lot of it does have to do with the color of clothing we are wearing. We had an intern at one time that really loved pink shoes, and they found quickly that the tortoises thought those were the coolest strawberries they've ever seen. And so they would follow her around very often. Jim asked if they mate for life. So these guys would be part of what's known as the SSP program in the zoo field. Basically, they go where they are most genetically important to breed with various individuals. So unlike penguins, they will just breed with whoever is the nearest. Kayla asked if they can pull all the way into their shell. So none of the species we have in this exhibit can. They can pull into their shell slightly, where they use their legs to help protect their head and tail to an extent. But the only ones that can truly pull all the way in are the true box turtles. Walter asked, how much do they eat? So these guys eat nearly constantly. They are browsers. In the wild, they will eat lots of grasses, flowers, and the occasional fruit that will fall. Here at the zoo, we provide constant supply of Timothy hay for them to snack on. It's a very high fibrous hay for them. And also 3 times a week, they'll get their big produce snacks, which include things such as yams, carrots, cactus pads, leafy greens, and during October even, we'll give them jack-o'-lanterns filled with all kinds of fun treats for them to roll around and chomp down on. Jessica asked, are tortoises turtles? That is a great question. So that comes down to semantic vocabulary. Typically, the way we refer to it, tortoises, for the most part, will have a more elephantine foot. So you can kind of see they're much more stubby, made for land roaming. And they are typically primary herbivores, whereas turtles, not always, but most of the time, will have more clawed web feet for swimming, and they're primary carnivores. But there are exceptions to both. That's just kind of the overall rule for everybody. Samuel asked, how do we tell them apart? So much like individual people, they do all have distinct personalities and slight variations in the way they look. For instance, this one right here that we are training with, this is Seymour. The easiest way to tell her apart is because she does have the chip in her shell. We believe that happened due to just exploring the new exhibit and getting to know it, and she might have rubbed up on something incorrectly. But they get medical checkups all the time with our really great vet staff on grounds. Joey asked, where is the oldest one? The oldest one in the exhibit and our department is Mr. Pickles. He's over chowing down on some lettuce right now on the other end of the exhibit. Him and Mrs. Pickles always get their own special food pile because they just take a little longer to eat than everybody else. Zoe asked if they're nocturnal. So typically, you'll categorize animals between nocturnal and diurnal, which means are they active during the day or the night. These guys are actually a third option known as crepuscular. That means that their prime times to move around and find food is during the early mornings and the early evenings. So kind of the warmer and cooler
Good.
parts of the day, but not the blazing heat of the main day. The African spur thighs, for instance, will actually make burrows up to 10 feet in the ground to stay cool during the hot African sun. Hop on over to a different tortoise. So again, we have 3 species of tortoises in the exhibit. We have our 4 Galapagos tortoises, our 2 African spur thighs, which is the tan one right there, and then Mr. and Mrs. Pickles are our radiated tortoises. The ones chowing down right there are a mixture of a couple species. Our Galapagos tortoises are the larger grayish ones. They are actually the youngest ones in here at 12 years old. They're all siblings. They weigh about 160 to 180 pounds and are expected to get at least 300 to 400, if not larger, when they're fully grown. Whereas the tan one right there, that is one of our spur thigh tortoises. We have Bobby and Bubbles. They weigh just shy of 100 pounds and they are fully grown for their species. You notice they get their name from their front legs and their back legs. They have very enormous scaling on them, which helps protect them while they're burrowing and look a little bit scary if a predator tries to dig them out. Right now they're snacking on their 3 times a week produce. They get a little special treat ever so often. They have some green leaf, some romaine. There's also little bits of tortoise pellets, yams, and carrots in there. If you listen closely, you can hear them crunching. They're using their beaks. So, many people don't know this, but tortoises and turtles actually do not have true teeth. Instead, they have a beak-like structure, which they use to chomp and tear food items, where they can swallow it down into bite-sized pieces. Some are asked, how long do they sleep? It's a wonderful question. They do sleep quite often. So they'll go to sleep throughout the day and take as many naps as we allow them. But anytime we come out here in the yard, they recognize us as a good supporter of food bringing, and they know that means it's time to wake up and get ready to go. So they're going to stay very active right now. But most likely, once we leave the exhibit, they will take a nap after their big lunch, just like a lot of us out there right now. Daniel asked if they make noise. They can. So they can actually make various grunting sounds to each other, which is a behavioral cue. And also whenever they feel threatened or scared, or they just don't like the situation they're in, they can exhale all the air from their lungs very quickly, making a hissing noise as they pull their head back into their shell. Nancy asked if they get baths. They do get baths every week or 2. So we'll come out here with some fresh water and a scrub brush and scrub them down to try to get all the extra mud and dirt they collect by themselves off of them. They recently did get a bath. That's why their shells are looking a little shined up. Hop over to our radiated tortoises. So our radiated tortoises are our smallest tortoises in here, but they're also our oldest couple, Mr. and Mrs. Pickles. That is Mrs. Pickles eating some green leaf right now. She's about 50 years old. Mrs. Pickles has a much higher dome shell than Mr. Pickles. Also, if you looked underneath them, Mr. Pickles will have more of a concave or a depressed portion of the bottom of his shell, the plasteron. Jessica asked, what does their skin feel like? So it is wrinkly, but very smooth. A little cool to the touch unless it's a very warm summer day, since they do get all their energy from outside forces. If you were to touch their legs, it is a lot rougher, a lot more distinct in texture, just because their legs are used as protectants and very big motor muscles to move around. Amber asked if they live alone or in groups. For the most part, tortoises tend to live alone in the wild. Here, they do get along just fine. Everyone gets their fair share of space and food. But in the wild, food is a little more difficult to come by, so it is easier for an individual tortoise to live alone and find as much food as they can by themselves, and they will come together during mating season. Nicole wants to know, how much do they weigh? So our radiated tortoises actually weigh very little. They're our smallest ones, but fully grown. They are about 20 pounds a piece, whereas our African spur thigh tortoises, they are just shy of 100 pounds, about 90 to 80 pounds. They're fully grown. And then our 4 Galapagos tortoise siblings, they're our youngest 12-year-olds. They weigh about 160 to 180 pounds, which seems like a lot, but they're actually almost half grown. We're looking to get them about 200 to 400 pounds, or maybe even a little larger at full size. I'd like to thank you guys for joining us today here in the Tortoise Yard. We would like to mention that all the zoo staff are still on grounds every day doing our part to help maintain all these wonderful animals and make sure that they're having the best lives they can have, being well fed and enriched and trained every day. If you were to go to our website though, there are a couple things you can look at. We do have an emergency zoo fund right now that if you guys are able to donate, it will help us out a whole lot to make sure we keep doing what we're doing here. If you liked what you saw, that's what we need to keep going. Also, when we do get back to running, if you thought it was really cool being inside the tortoise yard with us, we actually do have a tortoise tour that is guided, where we will come in with you guys and the keepers will be here. We'll teach you a little bit about the tortoises, and also you guys will have a chance to feed them. So if that's something that you guys might be interested in, be sure to check the website often and look around all the different pages we have. Don't forget to join us tomorrow at 11 a.m. We're going to do this weekly, every day during the main weekdays at 11 o'clock, and we'll see you tomorrow. Thanks.